This one. There we go. There we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Hello to anyone tuning in online. We're so excited to have you here.
Sarah in the middle. Sarah, we'll call you Sarah in the middle. Who brought this project to us. I think many of you know, in terms of the context of the play, that back in about 2014, I and You was just a play that Lauren had written and got produced as part of what's called a rolling world premiere. This is a model of producing new plays that is not about, that helps avoid this thing we call premieritis in the business, in which artistic directors only want to be the first person to ever do, or the first theater to do the play. The Rolling World Premiere allows a number of theater companies to participate through the course of a year. It allows the playwright an opportunity to see 2, 3, 4, 5, even more productions of the play. These are not co-productions. These are fully different productions with different directors and so on. We read the play. I had come to Only Theater after being at the National New Play Network, which was the organization that put I and You together, the Rolling World Premiere. And when I came to Only, I decided I wanted very much to do it and be part of a Rolling World Premiere. The first theater that did it, Marin Theater Company out in Marin, California, did it, directed by Sarah Zusin. So amazingly seeing that production, I sent a board member and her husband, Susan and Jay Finkelstein, out to Marin to see it. And I actually have that program now upstairs.
Oh, wow.
Now upstairs.
I don't have that program.
So we did the second part of that Rolling World Premiere. And then when I found out that there was going to be a musical version of I and You, which Sarah was also helming, I said, can we be second as well? Can we be second this time, but do it in a slightly different way? You all have bios for these three amazing artists in your programs, so I'm not going to go over again who they are, but there are some things I do want to quickly say about them. First of all, they are among the kindest people in this business, and this is not a business known for kindness, especially combining kindness and great talent. I think some things that you might not know about Sarah in the middle is that she has worked in just about and directed in just about every prominent theater company in the American theater ecosystem, far more than I have, and brings that incredible wealth of knowledge and talent and experience to bear on this production. I think Ari, in addition to her prodigious theater credits, she is a former beauty pageant queen. You must read up her Wikipedia article. A former contestant on American Idol, at the forefront of a burgeoning interest in the U.S. in stories about and by Southeast Asians. And I want to say one of the reasons why I really enjoy working with you, Ari, is because you're an activist and you really put your conscience where your the metaphor is not going to get there, but you get it. She has a conscience and she acts on it. And no, it's true. And Lauren, her very short and modest bio belies the fact. I think the one thing I want to pull out of Lauren's great experience is that she has played such an amazing role reviving onstage legacies of extraordinary women that we don't know about from the history books often. Silent Sky about astronomer Henrietta Leavitt, her work with on Jeanette, very first, that was the first time you two worked together, right? A musical about Jeanette Rankin, the first first woman to serve in Congress, and then Billie Jean about not the Michael Jackson song, Billie Jean King. So these are three really extraordinary artists that I feel very fortunate that we can share our audience with them and their incredible talents. So there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. Did I miss anything? I missed many things. All right, obviously, to start, I know that you've answered this question a million times, Lauren, and we're gonna go, I think, just down the row and then bring it back to me, and then I'll ask a question and we'll go back down because we only have one working mic. How did I and You, the play, come about, for those that don't know?
Sure, hi everybody, thanks for being here. I and You was, I write a lot about, as Jason said, women in history, women in science, a lot of feminist stories about undiscovered or uncelebrated women. And then my agent at the time, I was sort of a young playwright, was like, can you maybe not write a corset history science play, like just one that's contemporary? And so honestly, I love a challenge. And so I was sort of born from this idea, what is a story that feels to me as big as those historic, epic plays that I love so much. So I wanted something that feels, it's contemporary, it's cool, it's young, but also something that has an enormous theatricality and a big heart. And so that's the sort of challenge I set to myself to write this play. And so part of it is each of these characters represent a lot of me as a kid, and me now too. I'm probably more Anthony than Caroline when you see it. You know, a perfectionist, A+ student, nerd, lit nerd, and then Caroline's sort of ferocious curiosity and sort of weird girl aesthetic. But you know what, this was a chance for me to write something that I felt was both big and intimate at the same time. And, you know, really sort of say, even though people might come to this and say like, oh, it's a teenage show, but we all were, and we still are those people when we were 15, 16, 17, the kind of spark of self that we were, discovering our capacity and our curiosity for the world and our ambition at that age is sort of what I wanted to tap into and sort of reflect back on all of us, have us all think about who was I at 15 and who of that 15-year-old is still in all of us, no matter our ages, which I think is why the play, if I may say so, tends to speak to a lot of audiences of all sorts of backgrounds and ages, because it reminds us the source of us and ourselves.
How did it come to you, Sarah? How did the play originally come to you? Did you know Lauren beforehand?
I did know Lauren beforehand. I met Lauren at the O'Neill. I think we were both kind of right out of grad school. My husband's actually a playwright. He wasn't my husband at the time. He called me up and he said, I'm at the O'Neill with this playwright, Lauren Gunderson. I think you guys should meet. I think you're going to have a lot to talk about. And that was about 20 years ago.
Thanks,
so
Josh.
We've been talking ever since. Lauren called me up and asked me to direct I and You at Marin, and it was a terrible idea. I was just starting a new job. I was trying to start a family. There was a lot going on at the time, and my brain was like, those dates aren't gonna, but before my brain could finish up, my mouth said, yes, of course, I'll be there. And I'm so glad that I did, because this piece has just been, it's been with me now for over 10 years. And I think it's taught me every time I've returned to it or seen it. And certainly the process of this musical has as well. I think that there's a reason that we go back to women. There's a reason that Lauren to work on it here at Bowling Theater. It's just been such a warm, nurturing environment for this piece, and the piece has grown so much as a result of it. It's great to have a first production, but it's so essential to have a second production. I love what Jason's saying about this rolling world premiere kind of ethos, because a piece isn't done after the first outing. It's not done after this. We're continuing to learn and shape it.
So Ari, tell us how this project and how Lauren came to, well, tell us first how you got matched with Lauren, or Lauren got matched with you on Jeanette, and then how this project came about.
So ironically, a venture capitalist connected Lauren Gunderson and I. And I think it was so funny because I was talking about ambitions and goals and stories that I want to tell.
Does that venture capitalist want to support this
I know,
project?
right? No. And I was talking to him about the stories I wanted to tell. I said, I really think you need to meet Lauren. And I don't think he quite realized how much synergy there actually would be. And I became obsessed with this woman, Jeanette Rankin, who's the first woman elected into US Congress before the 19th Amendment. And I always joke that I trapped Lauren into working with me, because also, like most people, unless you're from Montana, don't know who Jeanette Rankin is. And unbeknownst to me, that is like Lauren's mission, is to make sure these incredible women from history, their stories get told. So I was able to trap Lauren into, I'm like, oh, you don't know Jeanette Rankin? Okay, interesting. And so then we quickly started working together, and we were about to have our first production, and COVID complications didn't end up happening, but we had created such beautiful trust, and I think that is, the reality is it's really hard to find that in collaboration. And so with that trust that had already been established, we're like, we have to work together again. And that was a 16-person musical. So we're like, what about something smaller?
These two-person musicals are so easy.
So easy. They have their own set of challenges. But she shared with me her play, beautiful play, and I had not had the privilege of being able to see it yet. And I read it on an airplane. And so I had no service, and I was just reading it and sobbing. And I think the person next to me was like, what the heck? Who is this for? Why are you crying? And then by the end, as soon as we landed, I turned my airplane off and I texted and I said, we have to freaking do this. And that's really, and then we just started collaborating from there. And it went pretty fast because of the built trust and because of the incredible story that had been developed.
So, for those of you that don't know this play, how many of you remember seeing the play when it was here or anywhere else? Oh, great, a number of you have. For those of you that have not seen it or don't know anything about it, it's about two high school students, Caroline, and I don't think I'm giving away anything to say. Caroline is fairly homebound due to a chronic illness since childhood, and she is, however, a 17-year-old, presumably high school senior, and Anthony, also a 17-year-old high school senior, shows up in her room, as you can see, it's right behind, having been assigned a project on Walt Whitman and Leaves of Grass that the two of them have to work on, and in fact, the project has to be done tomorrow. So that's the setup, and then play/musical ensues. I want to go back to Lauren. Why did you choose, I don't know that you can really put your finger on it, but talk to us about why did you choose Leaves of Grass? Why did you choose Walt Whitman for these two young people to be working on?
You know, it was an important, I remember studying it in high school, and it so affected me in a way that Anthony, as you'll hear, will say, you know, they assign a lot of homework, but this isn't just homework. This was the first time for him that homework sung, that it felt important, and not just in the chore of learning, but in the sort of gift of being exposed to something that is going to change the way you think and see the world and feel, which is sort of how Whitman hit me as a young, you know, a writer who I loved words, and I wanted to write and to study how the best words work well together. And Whitman is so raucous in the writing and so rebellious that it felt sort of like, are you sure we're supposed to be learning this in school? And so I just carried that with me. And so when I was met with these two characters, I thought, oh, is it Emily Dickinson? Is it Austen? And there's something just so American and ferocious and kind-hearted, open and yearning about Walt Whitman, that it felt perfect for high schoolers. Just that need to be known, and it's almost like he's trying to find himself through language, which felt very much like these two trying to find themselves through their art forms and through connection and through you know, all the what they wear and how they talk, and it just felt very youthful as well as something classic and iconic. So that was sort of the thing. Now, what I didn't know is it's a long poem. Leaves of Grass is sort of one. It's a collection of poems. It's one big journey, and the very final passage, sort of that you'll hear repeated again and again in the play, comes to mean so much more. And when I was writing it, I sort of didn't get how perfect it was for this particular story, which is one of the many ways that this play is sort of spooky. There's a bunch of times where I sort of wrote something and then later clocked, like, oh my God, that's what that could mean. Oh my God, there's 4 meanings to that. I didn't see them the first time, or so it's sort of Whitman is a little bit hanging out with this play.
Even in rewrites,
Even in
when you write
rewrites.
from Carter, you're like, Walt Whitman saved us again and again.
Yes. So thanks, Walt.
You were mentioning how Whitman, Sarah, feels so different in 25, 26, than it did in 2014 in terms of being an American playwright, writing about the Civil War. Can you expand a little bit on that, Sarah? I would love for you, and I don't think you need to be worried about politics with this group of people.
I think that Whitman, to me, reminds me of great mystic writers. And in working on this, I thought a lot about writers like Rumi and Hafiz and Rilke, and like writers that are just taking on both a very poetic and personal, but also epic themes, which I think is at the heart of your virtue, and that they are hard on their sleeve. They're not telling you what to think, but they want you to be moved. And I think that is what music does. It's what theater, like you know, Lauren's writing does. It wants you to be moved. It doesn't leave you in the same place that it found you. And I think that's certainly true of this piece. Yeah, I mean, there's so much great stuff in Leaves of Grass, but something that's really powerful to me is Whitman's letter to America, which you'll hear as part of this. It was also in the original play, and Ari has put it to an incredible setting, just gorgeous. And we were working it in August in Princeton and putting the pieces together. And there's a young woman who spends time at the theater, and she is Caroline's age. And one August morning, her dad was picked up and detained, and he's now deported. And I think of her so much with this piece. I think of it in Whitman's letter to America, which implores the listener to reconsider what they've been taught or told, to dismiss whatever insults their own soul. There's such a strong political cry in it, and it's also really poetic. And I think that we don't always think of politics and poetry sharing the same space. But I feel passionate about that as an artist, and I know these two do as well. And I also think that women really grew on me. Maybe it's, you know, since doing the play, I've been a professor, I've been an artistic director, I spent a lot
You think of romanticism as the individual, I and you. I'll ask you about the title of the play later. Ari, I want to ask you specifically as a lyricist, not just as, well, I mean, you can't necessarily separate composing and lyrics writing, but you had a number of tough things. This was a very difficult assignment. You first of all had to take Lauren Gunderson's very specific rhythmic language in this particular play. And if you, I advise anybody to buy a copy of the play itself or the book of the musical when it comes out, so you can just enjoy that, understanding how that works. And then you also had to, figure out a way to set that, or adapt that, or work off that, or work in, contravention to that. And then you had to do the same thing with women. So, how did you handle languages?
Sounds like there's a story.
No, it's fun. I mean, the first one, thankfully, because I don't know if it would have been as easy. I'm saying that this was easy, but if Lauren and I didn't already have the trust of the relationship. So I did also know Lauren's style, and we already established how we work together in our different aesthetics and how it comes together. So that one felt a little bit, I think what's challenging about I and You is just two-person musical, you don't see a lot of them. And I think there's a reason, because sometimes it can actually be really challenging, even from a sonic standpoint, right? Two people have to have different voices in order to carry the show from a sonic and exciting way to get us to the ending. So that was a challenge. And then also, we're here in this bedroom for the show. And so how to keep those emotional moments earned from a musical standpoint, because the old adage of musical theater is when you can no longer speak, you sing. And so how do we continue to do that when it's just these two people in Caroline's bedroom? And I think we did a really good job at it. I think that Whitman was a challenge. Whitman was a challenge. Thankfully, so my background is in jazz. I got my undergraduate in jazz. And it was really awesome to be able to know that Anthony already, his favorite genre of music is jazz, which is nice. And so this free verse nature of Whitman, he does not rhyme, which if you know anything about songwriting is you rhyme, especially in musical theater when it is really difficult. A lot of information is being thrown at you. There's this concept of perfect rhymes. So having the rhymes be exactly the same so you can understand and kind of almost anticipate what the end of the next phrase is. Whitman does not do that. And there's quite a few times where he had to turn his music into song. And so being able to actually have the underbelly of jazz in this free verse element that is already in the nature of the music is actually lend itself, again, when you're the spookiness of I and You, it's actually the answer was already there. And you didn't quite realize it until you just keep digging in. And so because I had the background, I've been using this term, it's not really traditionally, I think any jazz cast would probably hate me for saying this, but the concept of a jazz vocalese, where it's when you take a jazz solo, usually by an instrumentalist, and you put lyrics to it. I've been using that as inspiration. Technically it's not, because it's the opposite. I'm taking these lyrics and putting it to more of an improvisational melody. And so that, having that background and that framework really inspired the way that I approached turning this really dense, profound, beautiful, but you have to make sure you're emphasizing certain lyrics and words to make sure that we understand what one is saying. And so that was an exciting challenge.
I love, you mentioned the challenge of doing a two-person musical, with the challenges attendant on that in terms of only two voices, and then you mentioned only this little room. So, Sarah, how did, as you and Beowulf were an amazing set designer that we worked with, the entire design team we're very lucky to be working with all of them, but how did you and Beowulf decide, without giving anything away, to create this room, and how did you find directing a musical in a teeny space with 2 actors?
Well, Beowulf's just an incredible set designer, and it was a real pleasure to work with him on this. One thing we felt so strongly about is that this is a teenage girl's room, right? There's a version of this that takes up your entire set. We've all seen those kind of shows where it's like, it's a room, but wow, that's a really big room. And I love Lauren's, writing for its rhythms and its comedy. And interestingly enough, as a director, the size of your set controls your comedy. If you want something to be funny, if it's too big, it's not going to be funny, because it's going to take people so long across the stage that it's going to dissipate all of this sort of tension, right? But making this the size of an actual teenage girl's bedroom, we talked a lot about how do we create a playground so that it doesn't become static, right? Because the thought of just having 2 people in a room and they're just going to be standing there talking the whole time. So as you see, it's a bit of a jungle gym, and we use every corner of it. But I love working with designers. I like the idea of sort of visual dramaturgy, and how do we really create an arc visually over the course of a show? How do things accumulate? How do they accumulate energy with the color, with the layers, with more and more in the musical? So it was really a pleasure to work on this with these just really A-list designers.
Yeah. Talk to us, please, Lauren. Play to musical. What things did you have to let go of? What things did you have to build? Did you have to build more scaffolding? How did things change in that regard?
Yeah, a lot of it is, for those who know the play, there is a lot of conversation about music in it.
Yes.
And because it is a play about poetry, we're already listening to words the kind of in a rarefied way. So we're actually trained to lift a lyric or a bit of poetry up, which, you do that and sing it and it's a song. The point of this is it has to be a play of great emotion to earn the singing. You're not just going to sort of sing about homework. No, they're not. They're singing about all of the pain and joy and triumph and tragedy that you can fit in a 16-year-old girl's room, which is frankly a lot. It is a time of great emotion and growth and curiosity and quandary for teenagers. So in some ways, this is the perfect people to sing all of the things. I think the real investigation between the play and the musical is music also allows for an interiority that the play, that is in the play, but it's in the nuance of the acting and the directing. And so this sort of lets Caroline and Anthony's secrets out for the audience. And so we're going to hear what they're thinking before they're ready to say it, before they're ready to do anything with these thoughts or even understand them themselves. So you'll be able to sort of tell through Sarah's beautiful directing and Ari's incredible songwriting, what's in the hearts of these people and how that tension is pulling them, sometimes in conflict with each other, sometimes towards each other, and always this sort of drumbeat of time and the pressure cooker of what's in this room and this assignment and Caroline dealing with all that she's dealing with and what Anthony comes into the room with. And so it is a way to sort of unlock some of the secrets of these characters in a really cool way that I know as a playwright, but trust the kind of naturalistic acting, so that we know just by in the play version just what that one look that Anthony gives her. There's so much there, but in the song, in a musical, that look becomes, he's going to tell you about it. He's going to sing about it, and I find that that's a sort of way. It's a real pleasure to see the characters and meet them again, discover them again, and we did change some things. That beautiful speech that Sarah was talking about was Anthony's to deliver in the play, and we found as a team that it was actually much more interesting and impactful for Caroline.
With the musicals that we've done, each new musical is a different development process. Sarah, can you talk about what the development process was for INU, how you led that, and in fact how you helped share steer the journey with Lauren and Ari towards where you are today?
Yeah, musicals have a real reputation for taking forever, and it's true, many of them do. Many people will tell you, oh, musicals take forever. They can easily take 5 years, 10 years. That's not at all unusual. I'm a pretty reckless person, so I believe in leap and the neck will appear. When Lauren reached out, Lauren and Ari saying, we think we want to make this a musical, you just sometimes have that feeling. It's like, that's a great idea. We're going to do it. We're going to, already started some work on it. We commissioned it. And then just fast-tracked it. Both of these women are very, very busy. So I think at one point we looked at the calendars and we were like, well, that's when they're free. It was probably way too fast, but like I said, like leap and the net will appear. So we just put it on the calendar at McCarter. As Jason said, he had found out about it. He called every couple of months asking, I was like, there's not even a script yet, dude. Like, sure, we can do it, but and then these two work so well together. I laugh that it was America's most active Google Doc. Now it's international. It's in the UK, so it's an internationally active Google Doc. There were a lot of Zooms, and I just believe that. I believe in the of course, there has to be a there, and I knew there was as a director from working on the play, and because I had so much trust in them as collaborators. But I do think that having a deadline is just so motivating. Oh, and as a director and artistic director, we just knew, okay, we're September of last year was when we were going to put it in front of people, and I think collaboratively then things just rise to meet the challenge, and I'm so glad we did. It feels like it wants to be in the world in this moment, and there's been a ton of work since McCarter. Of course, we learned a lot. We got back into a room again in January with what we learned. We made those changes coming into the process here, and I'm sure even tonight I'll be taking mental notes and just excited to get back into conversations, because I think two things can be true at once. We've made something that we're so proud and excited to share with you, and also that is the fun of new work. We'll be probably listening to all of you tonight to hear when when people laugh and when they lean in, and it's such a delight to just get to continue to tinker and polish and shape those things, and these actors have been such a, as you said, Steph, our choreographer, and these incredible actors, the whole team here has contributed so much.
Is there anything that you missed, Ari, that you all decided to remove musically from
There's going to be
show?
B-sides. There's going to be B-sides. Oh, gosh.
I have one. I have one. But I'm actually not normally super precious. What were you saying?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm gonna say. I'm not
Like
precious.
inside.
I'm not precious. I think whatever is best for the piece always trumps anything. I don't hold on to babies because they don't exist if it's not good for the piece. But there's one song. There's one song. It's called, we actually
idea the number you're talking about.
Live It and Love Supreme was the song. And loved it. And our original music director at Princeton, when I told her that I think we're going to cut it, because I was pushing, I always did the first one, like, let's cut it, let's cut the song. If it's not working, we need to move on, we need to create something new. Better ideas will always rise. But this one I held up, I think, for the longest time. I was like, no, this next track. I was like, you just try a new one, but that's always there. If you want to go back to it.
I was like, no. Can we?
No. Okay, well, after this one run, we can cut it. After this one, and finally, gosh, we need to cut it. I was like, damn it. So I went to speak to their music coach. She's like, no, you're cutting that one. But we'll release it separately. I think the song that ended up replacing it could not be a better. And this is like, again, it just actually is confirmation. Even when I was in my stubborn moment, that better ideas will always rise if you start to find you're butting up against an issue, a better idea will rise.
Though the show is only about 85, 90 minutes, it's divided into 3 movements. How?
Yes. Are we saying movement? Let's say movement.
Oh.
Yeah. No. I've been
Oh.
lobbying for movement.
All right.
So not scenes, movement.
Oh, I see, yes.
They're not acts. So it's musical. It's a musical phrase.
Yeah, I didn't feel it was acts. I didn't feel it seems. So, how does it change, whether it's musically, directorially, textually, that you want to share from movement to movement? Anyone?
Let's see. So at the beginning and end of every movement, we see it's about what changes for the characters, and where we meet them at the beginning of the play is about as far apart as you can get. But they are sort of like, those videos of fast forwarded of 2 galaxies sort of passing through each other and then coming back again, and then they end up all swirled together. That's the structure of this play in terms of these 2 people. And so at the beginning, we find them as far apart as they can be. By the end of the first movement, there is a sort of a curious détente. I keep using that word curious for this play, which I think is accurate. And there is a desire to know more. Not totally comfortable, we're not best friends or anything, but there's a what is it about you? And what is it about you that leads them together? The beginning of the second movement is activity and this sort of allegiance and alliance building between their enthusiasms, their shared enthusiasms, which sometimes bring them a little too close. That's when the galaxies sort of smoosh through each other and are slungshot away. And this closeness and then, as new friendships build, there's a lot of honesty and openness that both deepens intimacy, but can also lead to hard things to talk about, and that can be an act of repulsion. And then this coming back together, and then between 2 and 3 is part of the most intimate and open and vulnerable that the characters become, which leads to the most open vulnerability and sort of when you get to that vulnerability, you get the truth. And in this play, you get the whole truth. And it takes the whole play to get there. So it's the short structure is as far apart as you can be to as close as you can be, from beginning to end. And then we see them sort of find this rhythm of discovery and support, which requires some hard conversations and moments of I'm out of here, I can't do this anymore. And then that, of course, allows an even more beautiful reunion after that sort of breach. And so that's sort of how it goes.
I'll say one thing also from musically of using the movements, there's just more music as we go on too. So even underscoring and how close in proximity the songs are to each other is very intentionally heightened as each movement passes.
Yeah, sure. You had an opportunity working with Stefania Bulgarella, our amazing projections designer, to also emphasize changes from one movement to the next that you certainly couldn't have done if it were just a play.
Yeah.
I mean, these projections seem to be, other than the music, obviously, the most enormous difference between what I presume your production was, or any production of the play was, to now.
Yeah.
How did the 2 of you work together to, decide?
Yeah, Stefania's a really brilliant projection video designer. I talked with her about projections being a visual manifestation of the emotional life of the character. So for me, visually what it's doing is sort of what music can do. Music can give us so much information about how a character's feeling. And I'm really interested, like I said, I'm a very visual director, I'm very interested in that visually. They are intentionally abstracted, and that's important to me. There's not one, like a poem, right? There's not one meaning to what that is. There's meaning for me, there's meaning for the designer, there's things we talked about with the actors, but I hope you have your own journey with what it means for you. I think that I go see a lot of visual art. I think both music and visual art are really democratic art forms because the viewer
Stage. Nice. I and you in this mystery, here we stand. So we have a few minutes to take a couple, 2 or 3 questions, if there are any. I'm happy to. But those of you, since we've been very mysterious about the mystery of the play, we understand your questions might be limited. But does anybody want to ask anything? Yes.
Yeah, Jason. Actually, this question's for you. You have been and will be exposed. Continually getting inundated with various projects, past, present, future. What about this piece really drew you to want to bring it and show it?
The question was, what about this piece particularly drew me, given the number of projects that one gets an opportunity to review or gets pitched to you? Boy, that's a good question, because I have to like send my mind back to 2012, really. The experience that Ari alludes to reading the play on the plane, and just coming to an incredible emotional catharsis is absolutely true of this play. It's my recollection from reading it back when I was with the National New Play Network. And I don't remember if I read it in an early draft or you had already gone through a development process. I really don't remember. I think what I can say, Rob, is that so because my sort of background is very much dramaturgy, which is to say how old plays were written and how that is translates to contemporary times. I'm always looking for Greek drama. Does that make any sense? So when you study Greek drama, you learn a few things about it, and just really quickly, you learn that there's an I never pronounce these words right, and an anagnoresis, which is a moment of realization. You have a peripety when things change for the characters, flip from one thing to another, and that leads to a catharsis, the scene of not sorrow, pity, but pity and fear and pity, excuse me. That's what Aristotle wrote about all the great, whether it's Oedipus, Antigone, blah, 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 blah. In contemporary drama, you just rarely find something that brings you to that kind of a catharsis of pity and fear, and I do think this play brings you to a place of pity and fear. And Sarah's absolutely right. I was like a dog with a bone when I found out about it, and they were like, "I'm sorry, we don't even know. We haven't announced it. We don't know." I was like, "Please let us." Just because I knew, I didn't actually know Ari at all at that time, musically. So was when I first, and then when I started hearing some of the music,
Thank you, Jason.
does that?
That's awesome.
So, no, sure.
Catharsis.
Other questions there. One is that I last night Walt Whitman poem before any of you were born. So I appreciated both Sarah and Ari's insight again to what we might learn from him and that. Is there anything else we should know about Whitman that will help us with the play?
Great. The question is, it's a great question. Is there anything else that you think we as audience members should know about Walt Whitman before coming into this play? I have an answer, but I would rather hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, when breaking all of the rules of structure, which is why it was so hard to turn his work into, or why it was such a triumph to turn his work into song, because of breaking against the largely sort of British-defined poetic structures, including, you know, organized number of syllables per line and rhyming couplets and things like that, where he just says, no, what's the biggest, boldest way to say this thing? And the way that he, so the Leaves of Grass was basically one collection that he kept adding to. So it wasn't, there aren't 4 or 5 collections of Whitman's poems, it's one that he would then republish a couple of years later, be like, got these other 4 stanzas, oh, here's another 10. And so just this evolution of one thing as it grows is really important, and sort of a metaphor that this play can share as well. And I think the biggest part is, as Sarah mentioned, when he was writing this, America being in crisis and in plague and at war. 1860s, yeah, so right in the middle of the Civil War.
And he was volunteering in hospitals.
And so a lot of the work when he talks about bodies, and that is a sort of not just the beauty of them, but the horror of it as well. So that's part of what I think is so important about his work, is this incredible, just a beautification of a terrible thing, and then the way he describes beauty and love sometimes is through terrific language in terms of the terror of it. So it's just, everything is really heightened and everything is really extreme. And you know, there's just a lot of phrases sort of in an American Shakespeare sort of way that we adopt, and like, oh, Captain, my captain is his, and there's just 1,000 phrases that come from.
I had to memorize that.
I'm sure you did. It's beautiful, right? And it's interesting. A little side note. I love Whitman so much, and the work is so flexible that in my play that is perhaps the most different from this one is a play called Silent Sky about Henrietta Leavitt, and Whitman is also in there because he wrote a beautiful poem called When I Heard the Learned Astronomer. It's this beautiful. It's where the title of that play comes from as well. So I'm a Whitman devotee.
But I will say, and I will add, for me anyway, I think that if Lauren is Anthony in the play, we all can be Caroline, right? You, as Caroline is, as you will see, she's like, ugh, I hate poetry. I'm not going to give away one of my favorite lines in the play about how she hates poetry. So I think watching Anthony make Caroline fall in love with poetry, but watching Caroline fall in love with the power of language, and the power of metaphor, is exactly what can happen to, you all could hate poetry, and you might come out on the end of 85 minutes loving poetry, as Caroline does. Or you might not, and that's okay too, because as you all heard me say, well, have you heard this Paula Vogel thing? Paula Vogel writes the script, the director and the actors and the designers write the production, and each and every one of you writes your own play. So I don't know what play you'll see tonight. I know the play I see. There you go. I think we have time for one more question, if there is one. And it's totally okay if there's not. It just means you're hungry. No, Hallie, you don't get to. Somewhere in the back. In the back. I can't quite see you.
I'm very fascinated on how Ari and Lauren, you all worked on Jeanette, which was a bigger cast, and then this was 2 people. And you mentioned briefly a couple of times that it's more difficult to have just, or it can be challenging in its own challenges. Can you both share about that, just expand on it?
Just quickly repeating, the difference between working on a show like Jeanette with a musical like Jeanette with 16 characters and which is all 16 actors, which is more what we think of as the size of a musical, the challenges of doing it for only with only 2 actors / characters. Expand.
Yeah, sonically is challenging. I think with 16 people, you're able to get this huge wall of sound, which is a pretty traditional desire in musical theater. And so how do you still create the epicness and the fortissimo of music with 2 people and also a small band? And I think that the way that you're able to do that is also just like from a technical standpoint, is like how are they technically moving, like what's the voice leading of these 2 characters, and how is that their different sounds specific and unique, and then when do they actually come together? And so those fleshing of the specific sounds coming together, like Anthony being a little bit more inclined to sing jazz, and Caroline being this angsty, pop punk 90s. How do they actually come together? And so those specificities of those characters from a musical standpoint allows for the epicness in a way that 16 people, you're not going to have 16 different genres on stage. And so that is, you're able to just find different ways to create the epicness that is a little bit more obvious in a big cast.
Love two-handers for the challenge because they're really, really hard to write. And part of what I love about it is you have to use every bit of craft you have in a two-hander, because you can't have someone come in and add more conflict or add more tension or add some news. You know, you have to have just everything you need is between 2 characters, which means you have to do, it's hypercraft, because everything has to be already in them to continue the story. So they have to be full of secrets, full of confession, full of desire, full of urgency, so that these 2 characters have the entire opera between them. And so that means they've got a lot of need, a lot of desire, a lot of now. So it's a wonderfully hard art form, but what I love also about it is you get to know these characters better than any other characters in a bigger play, because you're only spending time with them. So they become you become their friend, you become their, you just learn so much about them so quickly and come to care so quickly about them. It's also an exercise in complement and contrast. So part of what I mean by craft is being able to sort of set them up so that these people are the least likely to want to be around each other at the beginning, and then how do we complement and how they discover things about each other that brings them a little closer together and a little farther away. So it's a nuanced sort of writing that, again, if you have people come in here and like bring the news of the day and let's go solve the thing this way, you can't. So somebody has to change dramatically in the moment in front of our eyes, because that's the only tool you have is an exit, an entrance, and the truth. And between those 2 people, you have all of it there. So the characters also have to be really interesting, really ferocious, and different from one another, which again, great craft in general, but if you don't have that in a two-hander, it's just gonna be boring as heck. So the idea of like what you have to do to make a two-hander work is sort of the best playwriting you can muster, which again, challenge accepted, let's go. And I think that's true about the musical form too. And it's also, it adds this wonderful satisfaction when we do find this harmonic language that they share, when we do sort of get the luxury of their combination of voices, it adds so much, or it exposes the heart and the soul of what these characters are, sort of in a different way, again, because it's just these 2 and it's this contrast of voice, but when they do meld into harmony, it's just this, it unlocks something deeply emotional, not just beautiful, not like, oh, they sound so great, but it tells the story for us, which is, again, if you're in a musical, you want the music to do the storytelling as much as the dialogue and as much as the language around it. So
I think that's a great hint of something to listen for tonight is, if you're watching tonight, is how the sound very first opening number, which is very purposefully 2 different kinds of musical experience, how you go on an arc musically to harmony in the same way you do textually, in the same way you do in terms of production. Yeah, you all have done amazing work. We are grateful. I am grateful you spent time, and I'm grateful for the gift of this place. So, thank you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being there.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Oh, please. Thank you.
Great.
Do you guys know where you're going for food wise? Where we are going to food for Kava?
Yes, I just need a ride.